All right, people, how are you doing today? Hello, is anybody out there? All right, how are you doing today? Good, excellent. Well, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm very excited to talk to Erik Hersman here from Gridless. He has had a very interesting journey into the African technology sphere, and I think that we're all gonna learn a lot and learn about some cool new opportunities. Now, I think that the topic for our conversations, Erik, is a little bit of an oxymoron. I think I've told you that, and we talked about that. And by the way, most importantly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Great. So why is it an oxymoron? Everybody's heard about Bitcoin mining, right? Raise of hands. Yes. And you know it's pretty energy intensive when you mine Bitcoin. Basically, Erik will explain it better. I'll just do the dumb explanation. But essentially, you have a bunch of miners, computers, and they use a lot of energy to produce digital currency. Now, it's an oxymoron to do this on the continent because you all know the challenge on the continent. There have been numbers that have been thrown around every year. About 40% of the people on the continent have either no access to electricity or unreliable access to electricity. So imagine doing something like mining currency on the continent, but more importantly and more interestingly, Erik claims that what he's doing with Gridless can actually help support the expansion of mini-grids. Do we want to know how that works? Yes, we do. Excellent, Erik. That's where you come in. So here's my on-purpose provocative question. So saying that you're going to support the expansion of energy access on the continent by doing a really energy-intensive process is sort of kind of like the fox, telling the chickens in the hen house that while I'm guarding the hen house, the eggs will be okay and prosper. No?
No. So yeah, that's funny. It's kind of like the old story about the axe saying it's made of wood and it's friendly with the trees, right? No, it's a little different than that. So energy in anywhere in the world, not even just Africa, tends to have a couple issues that you have to work through. One is when you go into new spaces with energy, there's not actually enough usage of the output of that energy. And that makes the economics hard for both the power generator as well as the community who's buying that power. Mm-hmm. So if you can come in and take up that stranded energy, it actually lowers the price for the community, and it also helps the energy generator be sustainable. So in many places you'll find whether it's building a 50 kilowatt site in some part of rural Kenya or a 700 kilowatt site in rural Zambia, it's the same problem everywhere. Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting, and I get what you're saying. So essentially, if you deploy a mini-grid somewhere, especially in, Asia or Africa, in a rural area, you may find that you don't have the consumers. Not everybody's going to have a refrigerator, not everybody's going to have a TV. They may have, cell phones, clearly, or maybe they use a lamp or something, or they have a small generator that they need to, but they may not immediately have those appliances, and so the grid does not actually have that many consumers. And in the meantime, that's where you step in.
Yeah, that's right. So we come in and we take up that excess energy and we use it for Bitcoin mining, right? So one other thing that needs to be maybe appreciated about how the energy works, especially here in Africa. And by the way, the same thing. It's not just Asia and Africa. It's also the U.S. Okay. It's also Europe. The difference is in that in those other countries or those other regions, they can have a grid that's interconnected.
Got it.
Whereas here, we don't have as good of interconnection between grids, especially between mini grids and the general distributor. So in Kenya, that's KPLC. In other countries, it's named something else. Mm-hmm. And so when you come in there, you're literally helping them because they have a major problem. Yeah. And so there's not a single mini grid provider that we've spoken to that hasn't said, yes, let's talk, let's figure out if we can make this work. Because everybody has this problem and everybody's trying to solve for it. And especially the investors in energy. So they're looking at these mini grids that they've invested in and are saying it's not sustainable. We're not getting a return on that investment. How do we change this? And so, you look at something that takes a heavy amount of energy, you look at something that's geographically agnostic, it doesn't matter where it is in the continent, and you look at it as a flexible baseload because it can do real-time demand leveling. So if there's a power spike needed by the community in the evening, usually between 6 and 10 p.m., then some of those computers in the mining, in the miners, they turn off.
Okay.
And then they can turn back on, and that can be done within minutes. So you can have real-time demand leveling and work with them in a way that nobody else can. There's no other industry that can do this.
I find it very interesting. We talked about this where you actually have a clause in your contract that makes sure not to penalize essentially the gridless, the producer of electricity. Meaning, if they have other residential or commercial clients, they take precedence and you step back.
No, that's right. So the community and the businesses in the community come before us. So we only take energy that nobody else is willing to buy. So we're not competing with anybody else. And so if they come in and they have a spike needed, that's no problem. If it's a longer term growth, that's fine too. We move our computers to another location.
Got it. Flex demand. Was that kind of clear? All right? Right? I need nodding of heads. That was kind of clear. Now, I think it's very interesting because I'm going to step back and just talk about the challenges of energy just generally on the continent. We're talking about mini-grids here because most experts believe it's the best solution for offering electrification to rural areas, right? For urban areas or for commercial or big-time industrial processes, you usually have a combination of many other different energy sources, including renewable energy. But as you all may know, it can be quite challenging. Here in Kenya, one of the largest, if not the largest wind farm project in the continent is Lake Turkana, which is awesome. It provides about 17% of the installed capacity of Kenya, and yet it had some problems in its inception because it was built, but it was very difficult to get the transmission funded. So these are very capital-intensive projects, and I'm just like thinking about the fact that you provide some sort of support for these projects as they roll out.
The initial idea for us actually was back in 2013-14 when Turkana Wind Farm was being built out. My business partner at the time was saying, wouldn't it be interesting if we could take some containers and actually put some Bitcoin mining up there? It was very early in the Bitcoin mining days, but we were thinking about it. But we had just gotten financing for Brick, the other company. And so I was like, listen, man, we've got to focus right now. We can't do that too. But you're absolutely right. So you have places like Turkana Wind Farm, which are large IPP, they're independent power producers that are trying to build something. It takes another 6 years for transmission to actually come about. So what do they do in that time? Well, that's a perfect use case for something like Bitcoin mining, because you can come in there, you can soak up that extra energy. It doesn't just go to waste, and there's a return on that investment. Now, it's going to be a lower return. It's not going to have the highest price of power, but it's still super valuable. It's better than zero. Yeah. Right. So actually, there's some really interesting stats about mini grids too. So mini grids, like the World Bank suggests that it should be 140,000 mini grids deployed across Africa by 2030.
Right.
If you do the math, that's about 17,000 a year, maybe more now because they haven't kept up with the numbers. Currently, there's 5,000 mini grids across Africa. Wow. So there's a lot that need to be built. The problem is the money isn't being deployed. There's money earmarked for it, and only one country, Sierra Leone, has done approvals of more than 50 mini grids in a year. So the country itself is bureaucratic. Almost every African country is too bureaucratic to be able to absorb this. And secondarily, the investors are too bureaucratic to release the money. And so you've got this issue that is actually stopping this blockage of really pushing the edges of electrification in Africa. Where we come in and saying, oh, hey, guess what? You can get a better return on your investment because we're here from the beginning. So we can actually even serve as an anchor tenant for a new site. Currently, we've been going to sites that have been built already and just need somebody to come and take their stranded energy. But we're now starting to sign with organizations who are building new energy and saying, hey, we'll take that from day one, and you have your anchor tenancy from the go.
Thank you for that. I think this is really exciting because, and I really am happy when you talk about like their challenges, big challenges, funding, bureaucracy, capacity. You know, the continent is growing in terms of its economies, the sophistication of the economies, what it produces, the population, and all that means we need more power. And so it's sort of kind of playing catch up, and it's not easy, but progress is happening, and I think it's always important to say that, because otherwise you feel like we're stagnant. I wanted to just quickly ask, of course I'm holding the answer, so I looked this up before. I didn't know either, but do we know what, I think it's 3 countries on the continent, I'm going to spare you this one, Erik, but 3 countries on the continent that are en route to offer full access to electricity to its citizens by 2030. I can tell you that they are in East Africa and one is in West Africa. You want to take a guess? Just shout it out. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. We're in one of them. Yes, thank you. Another one, close by. Ghana, good job, good job. The third, close by. Rwanda, done. You guys are good. Well done. But that's just to say that, you know what I mean, there's African ingenuity happening right here, and Erik is part of it. And on that note, I want to know, what was your journey into the tech space? You know, somebody unofficially called you either the shadow minister or the godfather of some of the African tech that has emerged here on the continent. So tell me about, how did you get into this?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I grew up in Sudan and Kenya before there was a South Sudan, but I grew up in South Sudan in Kenya, and then. I've been involved in the technology scene here for a long time. I was a long-time technology blogger, as well as building out some software-related companies like Ushahidi. And then back in 2010, built the iHub here in Nairobi, so a big part of the kind of tech community hub build-out across the continent. And then been involved, back in 2011, I actually got interested in hardware, and that's where we started up Gearbox in Kenya, which is a rapid prototyping facility. And then we also started Brick, doing the prototyping for Brick, which is a piece of hardware that was really, it's a modem designed for Africa, okay. With backup power, backup connectivity options. And along that path, learned a lot about both software and then hardware, and then deploying that hardware as infrastructure into rural communities, urban communities, transportation networks. And so when we eventually exited Brick last year, we were looking at what else we wanted to do. And Gridless, the company we run now, is Bitcoin mining, and it's like taking what we had learned about some of these communities, and that power is actually a really big problem, and matching that with Bitcoin, something that we had been thinking about for a long time, mm-hmm. and said, oh, actually there is a missing component here, and though it doesn't, sometimes the logic is hard to get to it. Mm-hmm. There's actually a really big opportunity here, and I actually think, so who here has ever seen a Bitcoin miner? Who knows what a Bitcoin miner is? There's probably, I know about 3 or 4 of you have, okay? Mm-hmm. So there's a few of you have. It's a computer that's about the size of a shoebox, okay? That computer takes about 3 kilowatts to run. And we put it in a container or on a shelf in a small deployment, and we just run it, but we have to connect it to the internet. And to do that kind of thing in rural Africa, you do have to understand how to do infrastructure. In rural Africa, you also have to understand how do you work with businesses there, how do you deal with the community dynamics, and things like that. And it was something that we already knew something about, and so it felt more comfortable. And so we said, well, let's go ahead and start it and see how it works. Our pilots went well, and we're like, okay, we could do more of this, and have been fortunate along the path on timing. Because even though Bitcoin over the last year has had a massive drop in value, it's been perfect for Bitcoin mining, because we came into it as the price for those computers was dropping.
Got it. And of course, there's something that we're going to talk about a little bit. Yes, and I'm happy you brought that up. I want to know if you put your digital money where your mouth is. So how do you pay your the electricity producing partners?
So we do a rev share with them, so they get paid in Bitcoin.
Huh.
And they choose what to do with that Bitcoin. Okay. So they can sell it that day. They can hold on to it and hope that the value goes up, mm-hmm. Or they can just hold it. Mm-hmm. It's up to them. Got
it. Interesting. Now, I also want to know a little bit about the road to raising capital for this company. I don't know what it was like walking into rooms and selling this idea. Tell me about that.
So listen, I've had the I've had to raise capital before. It's never fun. Whoever here has raised capital knows it's not fun. You end up doing a lot of conversations. Most of them no's. That didn't change with this. In fact, like you have a couple like, red flags to people. You're like, in Africa, hardware, infrastructure, Bitcoin, like all these things. And then you're like, So you really have to find the right people who are trying to solve a problem with their money, right? And if you can figure out that, then you can actually have a good conversation and move it along. We were very fortunate to find the Factory team last year, and they've been involved in mini grids in Africa for a long time. And even though internal to their own team there was pushback on this idea, okay, the principals in the organization said, yes, but we've tried everything else with monetizing mini grids and they don't work. So why don't we try this too? Okay. And so that's what I mean about trying to find an itch that somebody's trying to scratch and going forward with it. Because once you find your lead investor, the followers come easily.
Got it. And I've understood that there was a fund, I think, that Jack Dorsey's involved with that were part of your backers.
Yeah, so then we, in our seed round, we were fortunate enough to have actually one of the leading Bitcoin investors in the world, it's Stillmark, lead that round alongside Block, which is Jack Dorsey's company.
Got it.
And Jack has a big interest in Bitcoin personally, and he's made it a big interest for Block itself.
Got it.
And so, he was here in December and checking things out.
Nice. And how much did you raise again last year?
So we raised a total of $3 million.
Okay.
And again, timing is everything with startups, as everybody knows. And so we were fortunate to be able to raise in a down market, but we were able to raise because we were bringing in a new strategy and a new story that was really interesting, and we were doing it at a time where even the investors themselves needed to show that they were investing in things that really mattered still. And then the timing of it was perfect as well, because even though the price of Bitcoin was down and miners all over the world had over leveraged themselves and were going out of business, that meant there was a glut of Bitcoin mining computers. And those computers, when we were raising the money, this is the crazy bit, they were $8,000 to $10,000 a unit.
Oh, wow.
By the time we had raised the money, they were down to $1,200 a unit.
Wow.
And so we were able to come in and buy them very inexpensively, and then work to deploy them. So building a company in a bear market, starting a new company in a bear market is actually amazing. It's a beautiful thing.
Counter-cyclical investment.
That's right.
Interesting. Now, I leave you no room for sort of kind of a little bit of mystery here, because I think this is so interesting. So, how many people do you employ? Are you profitable? How many sites are you deployed at?
So not profitable yet. We hope to be by the end of the year.
Which is fast.
Which is very fast.
You were founded last year, right?
Yes. So it's very fast, but it's also good timing in the industry. So Bitcoin mining is a very, very tight OpEx type of. So operationally, you have to run a very lean organization and be very attentive to your processes, your inputs. We have no customers and we have no marketing. We don't need to.
Yeah.
Our only partners are the energy providers, and so what we need to do is not invest a bunch of people, instead invest in processes and good people who can do their job well. So we have 6 full-time employees. So it's fairly small. We don't expect to expand too quickly on that either. And then you asked how many locations are we? We have 2 sites in Kenya, and we just opened one in Malawi 3 weeks ago. They're all fairly small, so 50 kilowatts to 300 kilowatts. And then we're looking at a couple new countries that should be deployed in the next 2 months.
Got it.
And we've done everything with hydro so far. Hydro is, we do run-of-river hydro, so renewable energy focused mining. We're interested in geo, as well as geothermal, as well as solar. But solar just doesn't have the right dynamics because the sun only shines so much in a day.
Yeah.
And the capex, so the capital expenditure to buy battery storage is very, very high. So the ROI is 3 times as long as hydro.
That's an interesting conversation there. Being somebody who's reported on energy, the details of the different kinds of renewable energy really matter. Because even though we hear this overarching story that everything is great in terms of prices coming down. But when you are looking at these infrastructure projects, there are some costs that come in, and some of them also translate to the end consumer, which is why I guess there's been a lot of conversation about letting Africa transition at its pace, at its own pace, at a pace that does not jeopardize economic growth. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this, if you're going to talk about the kind of macro view on energy, it's like, why does Africa not get to do the same things that everywhere else in the world got to do? Why do we have to pay some other kind of price for our energy? Energy is one of those things that you don't realize how much of a difference it makes in your life until you're out in the village again, right? And you're in the village and you're realizing, though, charging your phone is an issue.
Yeah.
Reading at night is an issue. And so we're sitting in the cities and we can take care of ourselves and we're used to energy. But when you get out there in the rural areas, you realize, and by the way, if you don't know the numbers of the 1.1 billion people in Africa, 600,000 don't have access. So not even just being able to get affordable energy, but access to energy, okay? And then you realize that 600 million people is actually 50% of the whole world's unelectrified people. Right, so you're saying, actually, we have a major opportunity here. You think this is a problem? Yeah, sure, it's a problem, but problems are opportunities. Yeah. You can bring electrification into communities that have never had it, massively change the dynamics of that community. They can bring in wealth-generating businesses now, do things they haven't been able to do before, and that's actually exciting, right? So we're all about making good money with what we do. We're trying to be very profitable very early. It's very revenue focused, operationally lean. At the same time, it's great to be working in places with partners who are pushing the edge of the envelope.
Got it. I got to be controversial here. Would you ever consider doing mining off gas?
So we would do gas flaring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You know why I asked that question, right? The whole conversation about, as we mentioned here, letting Africa transition at its own time. Africa contributes about 3% to of carbon emissions, and basically has not contributed a lot to climate change. Suffers from the consequences of climate change disproportionately, and in many ways has been asked to sort of step up its game. And I think the continent is doing so. But there's a lot of voices saying that we have to be mindful of what the continent can afford and how fast it can move, and that it does not get penalized, as we said, in terms of reducing its growth in that transition.
Speaking to that a little bit too, Neanda, is the we, as Africa, we have 17% of the world's population. We use 4% of the energy. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's kind of crazy.
That's crazy.
And so as we try and get to that energy future where we're not like energy-starved communities, you use what you can. And there shouldn't be major penalties for that. And, even though I use renewable energy, I'll say no matter what the type. Because it's human progress. Is important, and you can't mortgage the future of people who don't have nearly as much as anybody else in the world just because you feel comfortable in your Western state.
Got it. Lots of people agree with that. Now, it's interesting to me, if we're going back to Gridless, that if you're successful at your business, right, you deploy these mining machines in lots of grids. You basically, in a certain way, help support and underwrite like the expansion of grids, of mini grids. At some point, they'll get all the consumers that they need. People will get the appliances, and you sort of your business model sounds like you put yourself out of business. Like you've done your 30,000 grids are up and running on the continent, and they have all the clients they need. Is that the point? Going out of business?
I mean, we're okay to go out of operations in any of these communities. That's not what we're up about. How we think about the future is this, though: is as Gridless, can we invest in energy being developed too, so that we can become an equity owner in that energy? And then when it makes sense if it makes economic sense in a new grid, let me actually break it down even more simple. Somebody wants to build a megawatt of energy in a rural community. If we come in there and help bring in the financing for them to grow it to 1.5 or 2 megawatts, could we then have an equity percentage of that energy in perpetuity in the future, where we can choose to do Bitcoin mining on it. But if at any time somebody's willing to pay more for that energy, then we would be smart and incented to sell it to them instead of Bitcoin mining. Now listen, there's a very important part of Bitcoin that we haven't talked about, which is, I believe, and one of the two tenets of which we built the company is that we need to decentralize the compute power, the hash power of Bitcoin to other parts of the world. We need to have it in Africa too.
Okay.
And so we do always want to have some hashing happening in Africa because it helps secure that network. So that is a more sound money into the future.
Got it. Yeah, I can understand that. I would like a raise of hands, just like how much faith does this audience put into digital currency in general? And a bunch of, of course. All right, you know, Warren Buffett thinks you all suck. And he's always trashing digital currency. So I'll ask Erik, as your representative here for the digital currency lovers. So why do you have faith in it when, you know, Warren Buffett, the miracle of Omaha, keeps trashing it and saying there's no future in it?
Yes, our Oracle of Omaha. So he's a value investor, right? He looks at companies that have long-term value. And, you know, first of all, Bitcoin hasn't been around very long, 14 years. And it has, and it has a lot of volatility in it. And so he's uncomfortable with that kind of thing. So I'm not going to speak too much to how much he doesn't like it. But what I will say is that there is, when anything new comes in, and this is any innovation, right? We've seen this with mobile operators as well. When anything new comes in that tends to go against that norm, against what they've built on, they're going to be against it, right? And so, you know, this is an innovation that's has to come from the edges, and it's not controlled by, you know, the central banks, and it's not controlled by governments, and it's not controlled by any one party, Bitcoin specifically, not the other cryptos. And that means it actually provides a very sound investment. It's countercyclical, it should be, because it's deflationary versus inflationary. And more importantly, if you're in Kenya and you're on a third-rate currency anyway, you should be thinking about it as a hedge against the Kenya shilling, much less maybe a hedge against the euro or the US dollar. Like, there's reasons for it being valuable. Do I think those other currencies are going to go away anytime soon? No. I mean, they're going to be here for a while. But I think there's a way that Bitcoin and Bitcoin is able to allow people to make their own decisions. They're able to hold it and not worry about the censorship and the inflationary pressure of the government in their own country, and they're able to move it in a way that doesn't have nearly as much friction as the ways we have today.
Got it. And when you mentioned earlier also that the volatility for you that hasn't really affected your business much. It's not really something that you consider, and especially I think you said if you're holding your coins for a longer term investment also.
Yeah, if you look at it as the store of value side, it's like, sure, you know, you hold it for 2-3 years, you're always going to do well with Bitcoin. At least historically you have.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I thought it was very interesting, you know, we had a little pre-discussion and I asked you, what do you want the audience to take away from this? And I've never, you know, most companies, I guess, you know, you want to protect your market share, but you're like, actually, I just wanted people to know that there are opportunities here. You want other people to come in and compete with you?
Yeah, when Andrew asked me if I could speak here, he's like, I said, well, I don't really need money. We've got our investment. We don't need any media attention. That doesn't necessarily help us. But you know, what I really love is that this is a type of business that others can get into, and I think we need more people doing it. It's not highly complex. You need to understand some things, but there's the ability to get into this is there, and I hope that more parties across Africa do it, because we can't even address all of the stranded energy ourselves as Gridless in just East Africa, maybe even in Kenya, right? So there's this opportunity to come in. If you're willing to invest your time, willing to invest in the capital to do this, you could build out your own mining grids. And we, you know, so in December, there's 4 other Bitcoin miners in Africa. We started Gamma, which is so gamma.africa online. So Gamma is Green Africa Mining Alliance, and it's just other miners in Africa from Nigeria to Ethiopia to Congo who are saying, hey, let's band together, share what we know with each other, help each other get connected to good suppliers, help other people if I know about an energy provider that needs a partner, I can't do anything with them. Maybe I can introduce them to you instead. And we're actually already seeing that. So in Nigeria, the guy in Nigeria has an excess capacity of energy. He doesn't have the capital to use it. So the guy from Ethiopia is now working with him on that. And I think that's how we should build this community.
African solutions for African challenges. I like that. Now, I think we're at the end. I want to make sure, does anyone have any questions? I want to, yes, please, go right ahead, sir.
I was wondering, why do you choose to use lots of small grids instead of plugging to Ghana, plugging to Hersman,
Yeah.
and doing big megawatt projects?
Yeah.
Is it that the price of energy was cheaper or any other reason?
So the question is, why do we go with smaller independent power producers instead of larger ones? And the response to that is twofold. One is that we're new to the industry and we want to start small to make sure that we know what we're doing, we have a good operation. You know, if you start big, you fail big. If you start small, you can learn along the way. Secondarily, we want to move fast, and it's a lot quicker to get the deals done with smaller producers at first and then grow into those larger producers in the future.
And isn't it, I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like there is a kind of like an impact investment aspect to what you're doing, and the ones that need the most support are the mini grids in terms of, and where the challenges are to expand access to electricity, no?
It has been impact oriented from the energy people,
Yeah.
but not, so we have two investor types. We have energy types who think about it from impact, and we have Bitcoin types who think about making Bitcoin.
Got it. We are at the end. I wanted to throw out one last question because, you know, I'm a bit of a nerd, and so is Erik. And so in the future, when, you know, new forms of energy come online, some controversial, like third generation nuclear power, but some other futuristic stuff, hydrogen, what would be the ideal power source, or really just the aspirational power source that you would like to mine your coins on?
Listen, Bitcoin mining is like water. It goes to wherever it's cheapest.
Yes.
So I think nuclear fusion, those things are amazing. And we're already seeing some people doing mining on nuclear. And I think fusion, if we can ever get that to work at scale, is going to be amazing for Bitcoin mining.
Awesome. Erik, this has been fantastic. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Neanda.
Give him a big round of applause.